Hello everybody, my name is Ilya,
And my name is Tyler. Together we make up Kovray, a couple that loves to play board games.
and today we're here to tell you about Manhattan Project Energy Empire.
Energy Empire is designed by Luke Laurie and Tom Jolly. It's published by Frostbite Games, who helped sponsor this video.
Now what you see here today is a prototype of this game because it is coming to crowdfunding. You can learn more about it in the description down below, but with all that said, let's head to the table and give you an overview of how the game is played. Manhattan Project Energy Empire is played in turns. Your goal here is to acquire the most points by building structures, gaining influence with the United Nations, acquiring energy dice, furthering your own agenda, and limiting your pollution. You'll take turns placing and retrieving workers until the last pollution token is removed from the global impact track. At this point, everyone receives one more turn and final scoring can begin. Let's go through a player's turn. Each turn you can either work or generate. When working, you'll place your workers on the main board taking the corresponding actions, while generate will allow you to take your workers back and acquire energy for future turns, sometimes at the cost of pollution. Let's take a look at the work action. You'll first choose a location on the main board and place a worker there. There are 13 locations you can choose from, each displaying this symbol. Some locations will require specific resources that need to be spent in order to carry out the corresponding action of the location. You cannot place a worker here if you cannot fulfill the costs of the action. If locations are occupied by other players, you can stack your worker on top of energy, making sure the stack is higher than any worker present there. You may even choose to stack additional energy to prevent other players from going to this location. And you can also place a worker on a location with your worker already present if your stack of worker and energy is higher than all present. Now you can never stack workers, just one worker on top of one or more energy. Now what do all these locations do? Well, industry locations can help you gain resources and trade them for more resources and benefits, or dice, which will help you acquire energy over the course of the game. If you ever gain pollution from any actions, you'll grab it from the global impact track and place it anywhere on your player board. Oil drilling will lead you to place a well token on one of the 4 spaces where you can. Pollution in oil wells can later be cleaned up. Commerce locations will give you the chance to obtain coins, buy or sell oil, and trade any of your resources you have as many times as you like for this action. Government locations will give you the ability to purchase an additional worker, acquire science tokens, and clean up 2 of your sites on your player board for a cost of a science token. Nuclear sites will need to be cleaned up twice as their impact is greater on your environment. Each section of locations also features a market where you're able to purchase structure cards by either paying coins or resources displayed on the space. Structure cards will score you victory points at the end of the game, potentially pollute your player board when purchased, and give you an ability you can use throughout the game. Speaking of, once you've placed your worker and completed the action of that location, you can additionally activate your structure and or nation card. The structure you activate must be of the same type as location on the main board where you placed your worker this turn. When activating your structure, you'll place workers and or energy equal to the pips on the card. If you have already taken the action, you cannot take it again until the space has been cleared, unless the structure card is a double use card, which in this case means you can take it twice but not in the same turn. You can use as many structures as you wish as long as they match where you placed your worker and they are able to be used. Additionally, you can also use your nation card. You can use this card on any of your turns regardless where you placed your workers. You'll place your worker or energy and spend resources to advance on the United Nations track. This demonstrates the influence you've gained with the United Nations. And that's the work phase. After you run out of workers to place, it's time to regroup and generate more energy. Let's talk about the generate action. To take a generate action, you must follow these steps. Step number 1. You'll first claim an agenda card if you have 2 or more unused workers or energy on your player board. These are game end objectives that will help you score more points. Step 2. You'll return all the workers from the main board and your structures and discard all energy back to the supply. Step number 3. You can refine oil to gain oil dice, discarding up to 4 oil to gain 1 brown die per oil discarded. These are temporary dice and will be discarded at the end of the generate turn. Step 4. You'll now roll all the dice you have, claiming an energy for each symbol present up to a maximum of 10. Step 5. Finally, you'll claim a pollution token from the global impact track. You'll check to see which die has the highest value of the ones you've rolled. If it's solar or hydro, you'll discard the pollution token. If it's coal or oil, you'll place the pollution on your player board. If it's nuclear, you'll place the pollution token on your player board, nuclear side up. This one's tougher to clean as mentioned earlier, as it'll need to be flipped before it's removed. You'll now return the brown dice to supply, and this concludes your generate turn. As you remove pollution tokens from the global impact track, global impact cards will trigger, which will trigger the scoring of a specific environment row for all players, reset one structure market, and apply a specific effect that may affect all or some players. As the game progresses, the oil prices will also begin to rise, which will impact the trades you can make. You'll continue playing, placing, and retrieving workers until the last space of the global impact track is revealed. At this point, the game end is triggered. Each player will take one final turn, and you're now ready to score. You'll first tally all the points on your acquired structure cards. You'll gain 2 points for each energy die you have on your player board. You'll gain points for how far you've made it on the UN track, with the player who's furthest ahead scoring an additional 3 points. You'll reveal your agenda cards and score points for each to a maximum of 5 per agenda. And finally, you'll score a victory point for each unpolluted space in your environment. You'll additionally get bonus points if your 3rd, 4th, and 5th columns are entirely unpolluted. You add up the points, and the player with the highest score wins.
Well, there you have it, an overview of Manhattan Project Energy Empire.
Let's dive into some of the key features of this game. What makes it stand out? What should we focus on? What do we want to start with?
The first thing I want to mention is Energy Empire is actually a revitalization of a previously made game. It's essentially the same game, different art, and this one in particular falls into a almost like trilogy, or I don't know if they're doing a trilogy or not, but a world that they're talking about where War Machine was right before this and Energy Empire is a subsequent game.
Yeah, exactly. This game also has a ton of modules and expansions all in one, which we'll talk about in a second, but that's part of it as well as all the expanded content you'll likely see in this game.
Jam-packed with good stuff.
Good stuff.
Well, what are we talking about here? What are some of the main mechanics that might draw somebody into trying this game out?
Well, this game is a worker placement game. You'll be placing your worker in 13 different locations, trying to take advantage of creating structure cards, acquiring resources, and at the end of the day, trying to not pollute as much as you possibly can.
Exactly. And what this worker placement game does differently than some worker placement games is there's those stacks that you have to be aware of. You can put in more to maybe stop your opponents from being able to access that space, or you'll have to use extra stack tokens or energy tokens to be able to go to zones where workers have already been placed.
And having this be not a round-based game, you're always trying to decide when do you want to take your workers back? When do you want to generate instead of placing additional workers? And do you want to generate additional energy? Do you want to convert oil to roll more dice? Although that may mean that you acquire a little bit more pollution. What ways do you want to really move through the game? The strategies you create for yourselves are really varying, especially with the agenda cards present, with how you approach your different strategies. There's quite a lot to play around within this game.
There is a lot going on with what Ilya just said. Let's talk about the fact that it is this balancing of resources that you really have to be aware of. I think that if you are a heavy gamer, mid to heavyweight gamer that really finds joy in that resource management, Energy Empire is definitely a game that will do that. You have to be very aware of what's going on and when you need to push forward and maybe hold back. Because you've got to be cautious of when are you going to clean up, when are you going to exchange your resources, how are you going to use those resources to manage and build different structures that really ramp up your strategy. And I think that it's an interesting strategy space to be in because you can't do it all.
You could not do it all. And another interesting element to this game is that you will acquire pollution over time.
You will, yeah.
Some of it will be radioactive as well. Some of it will be oil wells too. And sometimes that's not a great feeling because you feel like you're not going to gain a lot of points at the end. But sometimes it's the necessary evil. You're going to pollute lots throughout the beginning of the game. And then hopefully clean it all up by the end of the game. Hopefully you invest in a lot of the clean energies so you can get rid of all that pollution and score lots of points for your environment.
And I mean, hey, like it might not necessarily be the strategy that you're going for, but those agenda cards can really like drive your strategy forward, where maybe you are interested in having some pollution out there, or you are interested in being high in the oil collecting sectors. There are cards that really match up, and because there's like duplicates of these agenda cards, you can stack and get a lot more points just based on collecting those alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then quickly, before we jump into something that I know Ilya is going to want to talk about, is that this game ramps up. It starts out pretty slow, but as you get more access to the dice and a ability to get more energy, you allow yourself to build buildings, and there's a lot more going on than simply just placing your workers or refreshing or generating your board. So it's really interesting to be able to see round one, because there's not technically rounds, but the first little bit go a bit slower than usual, and then it very much ramp up into these, wow, I can do this if I place my workers here. I have access to these extra actions that I'm going to be able to use, but do I have enough energy? And the strategy decisions become more and more difficult to make, and that's what's fun about this game, is sort of optimizing and pushing forward with that.
You can also acquire more workers throughout the game,
Yeah.
so you are able to do more in between those work and generate churns.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the game is self-driven by the pace that you and your player set, because there is that global impact track, and the more tokens that you grab from there, the faster the game will go.
Yes.
All of a sudden, there's also the global impact event cards that score various sections on your environment board that also potentially create an effect or activate for multiple players that may include you or may not include you. And those are usually friendly in the beginning, and then as the game progresses, they become a little bit more harsher, because obviously we're just harvesting the environment, and that's not a very good thing.
I mean, it's just another thing that you have to be paying attention to, and I think for any gamer out there that is interested in those types of things, where it does get more and more resource tight, that a game like this is definitely something to keep an eye out for, or try to get your hands on.
And you can even peek at those global impact cards,
You can.
so you can kind of see what's coming up, which is interesting too. So you really do have to weigh in everything that you're doing in this game,
Yeah.
which is a lot, but it doesn't feel like a lot.
No, there is a lot of almost planning ahead, but timing is very key in this game too. When and where you do things can be very, very important on how your strategy pans out.
So that's all of the base game, which comes in this box. What else comes in this box is a ton of modularity and expansions.
Yes.
So we have the Cold War expansion, which adds a set of modules that you can add either all at once or kind of one at a time.
Yes. Yeah.
The biggest one is the Doomsday Clock. So you use the other side of the board, and you'll have another space where you can place a worker.
Yeah.
If you place a worker there, you'll advance it. You'll pay what the cost is, that the Doomsday Clock is currently pointing at. And then you'll draw some cards and reveal one, keep one secret. But all of those cards will add up to additional points you'll score at the end of the game, depending where the Doomsday Clock points.
Exactly. And it's really interesting because this adds another layer of resource management, where you do have to decide how you want to go into this space, and also pay attention to what everybody else is doing, because they can score a lot of points where you might be missing out. So it isn't something that you can ignore.
It also is an additional game end trigger. It can end either with the global impact track or with a Doomsday Clock if it hits that last hour.
Yes. There is obviously some new structure cards, new nation cards, and new global impact cards. Those just get shuffled into the deck when you go to play. And then there's also mega structure cards.
Mega structures.
Which are really interesting because they're put a certain number at the beginning of the game based on player count. And they're global structures that anybody can make. They are a little harder to make than the regular structures that you're familiar with, but
they
the
reap
payoff
more benefits.
is interesting. So again, it comes down to timing, planning, and what you think is best for your strategy.
There's also spies, so adding espionage. There'll be another additional card besides your nation card that you can place an action to, like you do with your nation card. And now you can use an ability of another player's structure. So you it's very thematic. You spy, you get in there, but then they also get a benefit. They get a coin from the bank for that. There's also the UN Envoy expansion, which adds a new track instead of the UN track, which has some modularity and ways you can expand on different tracks. as well as modularity across the entire game.
Yes.
So you can change different locations to new locations, so the game can look different game to game, really.
Mm-hmm. It is really interesting to have that much modularity in this game.
Mm-hmm.
It plays differently every time, and of course, like your strategies, you can kind of go with whatever you want to go with, but these will almost drive you in a different direction.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a solo mode. So for all those solo gamers out there, there's something for you to discover and adventure through and to really enjoy this game on your own.
Exactly. There's actually a lot of game in this box, if you ask me.
It's a lot of game in a box.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's a lot of information. So if we were to summarize, what could we say?
Well, this is a worker placement game that requires you to think pretty strategically and to think ahead.
Yes.
There's a lot of different pathways you can go and a lot of strategies you can develop on what you're going to do in this game.
Mm-hmm.
This game also does not have rounds and is turn-based. So you can decide when to place workers, when to take workers back and generate more actions.
Mm-hmm.
All in all, to try to create the best strategy to score the most points.
Mm-hmm. Timing is going to be really important in this game, and you're going to want to very much plan ahead in terms of the resources that you use. There's a lot of modules, like we said, we talked about. There's the Cold War module, there's just alternate locations, the UN Envoy expansion, and of course a solo mode if that's something that interests you. But with that out of the way, that gives you a sense of what you can expect from Manhattan Project Energy Empire.
A big box with a lot of game.
Exactly.
Now, if you are interested in this project, you can check out that link down below. It is coming to crowdfunding right now. You can learn much, much more about it and about the original game that inspired this game as well that has the same title.
Of course. And if you found this video helpful, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button if you're new here, because we love chatting board games with folks like you.
Exactly. Now, for our question of the day, what game of yours on your collection do you think needs a facelift?
Ooh.
What game would you love to see a new kind of revitalized version of?
Or even if it's just an old game that needs some love that you'd love to see brought back to the modern day gaming world.
Ooh, fun. Well, thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you at the next one.
Bye!